So, what a discovery. I'm at the People's Story Museum by the toll booth on the Royal Mile, and there are all sorts of amazing exhibits on the working life through the ages. So we've got lots of models set up depicting different kinds of work and workshops. I had been quite keen to get you into some of the WASP's workshops to see the setting in which some of the artists and craftspeople work. That hasn't turned out to be possible this time, but we've got Fisher Wives, we've got work at home, we have some not working hands, and more not working hands, but some interesting settings. Plenty of domestic work settings. So I've taken some photographs of the various displays, and hopefully we can all spread out in the museum on Monday morning and find some material partly for the working theme, but also partly for the settings. So you've got artifacts, hands from a model, and here looking a little bit at some settings. So I've been working a bit with some of the material, the displays in the museum, the People's Story, the Museum of Working Life. I had to go at a window cleaner, not sure, the poor chap did look like he was falling off the ladder, collapsed in his task. And I'm probably going to do some things with the Cooper, the barrel maker. And what I want to look at with this video is ways in which you might compose your figure and your composition, the figure, the setting, in order to draw attention to the hands, in order to push this theme of working hands. So I'll have another go at the Cooper barrel maker, but I've been looking at things like how I crop the drawing. I think I want to keep his head, but I could even crop it right down there so there's only a bit of head. He's got this kind of, the circle of the, I don't know what you call that, but part of the making the barrel. I think that's a helpful shape to draw attention to what the hands are doing. But I've also been looking at things like losing the top half of the figure a bit more in shadow, and using both the lighter part of the lower part of the composition, as well as this unusual circular shape to draw attention to the hands. So those are the sorts of things that you might consider. So for this sort of exploration of a composition, I think it's well worth working fairly small, doing thumbnail sketches. I'm just sketching out my man from photographs that I took in the museum. Okay, false start. He didn't fit on the page, or he didn't fit on the screen. So I'm sketching him out with lines, and I hope to go on to demonstrate, as I've just outlined, as well as trying to draw my figure in proportion, trying to get the hands to be sensible and believable. I also want to look at other considerations to do with the way in which the composition is framed, the way in which tone or light is used to draw attention to, in this case, probably the hands, or draw attention away from other things. So here he is in his setting. There's various bits of workshop paraphernalia, which I don't really want to include, actually, because I think there's so much in this hoop, which is his work, and the sort of support. So anyway, he's dressed for work. He's got his leather apron. So I want to include all of that and then come to his hands. So here we go. This is a small hand. It's narrowing at the wrist, changes direction down to the knuckle. Then the finger shape is small, and the thumb is probably quite sort of crucial, really, to his grip. So here I'm going to, I want to draw in proportion, but another possibility had occurred to me that I could actually exaggerate the proportion of the hands. That might be something that people would consider. If you want to draw attention to the hands, how will it work to have large hands, or would that just be too strange? I suppose what I've described about managing the light is it's almost a different way of, it doesn't make sense to say to enlarge the hands, but to certainly give them a greater importance. So here he is. I've sketched him out in lines, and I want to look at ways then in which I can affect this composition. I could I could stop it there so that there's a bit less of the head. There's a certain point at which it doesn't become sensible, I think, to lose the head. I think I'll try a bit of tone next anyway. So he's got, I think this is part of the apron. It's dark there. I think I want his background to generally be dark anyway. So as I've said, I'm doing this this is sort of half A4, A5 size. But I think for these manipulations of composition, it's a good idea to keep things fairly small. But I like to think that by doing that, maybe even doing it across his face a bit more, I can really lose or redirect the emphasis towards the hands. This is pastel pencil, so I can even do a bit of smudging. So as well as losing other parts of the figure in tone, I can also soften them and then bring, a bit more definition to the hands. Any of these manipulations, obviously you've got to sort of stand back and see what the overall effect is, that you don't disconnect. Well, in my case, I don't disconnect these hands from the rest of the scene. I'm not quite sure what this is a particular kind of support that holds the hoop in place. And if, things are going to get lighter, I've got to find a way of making that make sense with the rest of his figure. But I like the idea then of bringing out more light and more contrast, even more definition in those hands than in the rest of the picture. So that's one possibility of using the light, and as I've said, possibly cropping it there, so that could be my composition. There's of course the other end, where do I crop it? Could it become actually a square composition, or almost a landscape format, so that again there's not other things to distract? But I think the circle is so interesting, as something to draw attention to the hands. It's just quite a neat design. So just one more possibility. I've begun drawing this seamstress who is seated with her garment, and I thought I would just try this idea of enlarging the hands, giving her extra large, exaggerated, a distorted proportion. Just wondering if that can work. So she's holding the garment. So again, the usual things. I think one way in which I can make sense of this hand, although it has to be said, some of these mannequins they're terrible posers. They really look like they're going to get back problems from the way that they're sitting. Anyway, I want to enlarge these hands so she's got a thumb. And yes, using the cuff, the curve of the cuff is quite important. And this hand here. But I thought that in the case of the seamstress, as well as exaggerating the proportions of her hands, I think the way that the material comes from her hands, I think, is a nice way of drawing attention to the hands. So I've made them a little bit bigger. She might be slightly monumental in the sense that her head's a bit smaller and her figure gets bigger as we come down and get close to the hands, and then there's the material. So I think that's a possibility. I mean, there's nothing to do with her setting. That may well be other things like garments on hangers and so on. But again, it might be this composition. I'm just using the material, the fabric coming out of her hands, as a way of giving that some attention, and getting her again in something a bit darker. So there's another possibility. So we're going to be at the museum, the People's Story, the Museum of Working Life on the Royal Mile on Monday. I've attached photographs to the email with this video demonstration, and as well as having the opportunity to look at some of these work settings with these mannequins posed in their workplaces with not fantastic poses, but certainly hands abounding. There's also this possibility that I've tried to just demonstrate here of looking at how to compose the image in such a way that it draws, or you draw more attention to the hands and you make a real feature of the working hands. Okay, so see you soon. Bye-bye.